Captain James Wellington stood perfectly still outside the Queen's private study at Buckingham Palace. His red uniform was spotless, every gold button shining in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. He had been doing this job for 12 years now. Every day was the same. Stand guard, protect the royal family, and make sure no one entered without permission. James was used to his quiet life. He woke up at 5 in the morning, put on his heavy uniform, and spent hours standing in the same spots around the palace. Most days, nothing exciting happened. Tourists took pictures of him from far away. Sometimes children waved at him, and he would give them a tiny smile when no one was looking. But this Tuesday afternoon in April 2025 was different. A palace worker named Sarah came rushing down the long hallway. Her shoes clicked loudly on the marble floor. She was carrying a golden envelope that sparkled under the ceiling lights. James had never seen an envelope like this one before. Captain Wellington. Sarah called out, a little out of breath. This just came for you. Special delivery. James looked confused. He rarely got mail at the palace. His family sent letters to his home address. Official palace business went through his commanders, who would send him something here. Sarah handed him the golden envelope. It was thick and heavy, made from expensive paper. His name was written on the front in beautiful handwriting that looked like art. The letters were so perfect they seemed to dance across the gold surface. "Are you sure this is for me?" James asked quietly. He always spoke softly at the palace. "Yes, sir. The delivery man asked for you specifically, said it was very important." James turned the envelope over in his hands. There was a red wax seal on the back with a fancy design pressed into it. He had seen seals like this in movies about rich people and important events. But why would someone send him something so fancy? He carefully broke the wax seal, trying not to damage the beautiful envelope. Inside was a card that was even more amazing than the envelope. It was made of thick, cream-colored paper with gold edges. The writing on it made his eyes go wide. "You are cordially invited to the Met Gala 2025, he read silently. The words seemed impossible. The Met Gala. The fashion event where movie stars and singers went to show off their expensive clothes. The event he sometimes saw on TV when he was off duty. James read the invitation 3 times to make sure he wasn't dreaming. It was real. The date was set for the first Monday in May. The theme was written in elegant letters. Guardians of Tradition, honoring service through style. At the bottom of the invitation, there was a handwritten note. "Captain Wellington, your dedication to duty and tradition makes you the perfect representative for our theme this year. Please attend in your full ceremonial uniform. The world needs to see what real service looks like. Anna Wintour." James knew that name. Anna Wintour was the most powerful person in fashion. She decided who could come to the Met Gala and who couldn't. And she was inviting him, a simple palace guard from London. His hand started to shake a little. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then read the invitation one more time. This had to be a mistake. People like him didn't go to events like this. The Met Gala was for celebrities, billionaires, and fashion designers. Not for someone who spent his days standing still in a hallway. But there it was, his name written in perfect letters on the most beautiful invitation he had ever seen. The envelope smelled like expensive perfume. The paper felt smooth and rich between his fingers. Sarah was still standing there, curious about what had made the serious Captain Wellington look so surprised. "Good news, Captain," she asked with a smile. James looked at her, then at the invitation, then back at her. He didn't know if it was good news or the most confusing thing that had ever happened to him. "I think," he said slowly, "my life just changed completely." The next morning, James woke up before his alarm clock. He had not slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the golden invitation sitting on his kitchen table. Part of him thought it might disappear by morning, like it was all just a strange dream. But when he walked to his kitchen, there it was. Still golden, still real, still impossible. At exactly 7 in the morning, his phone rang. James jumped. His phone rarely rang this early. Captain Wellington. The voice belonged to Mrs. Margaret Fitzgerald, the Queen's private secretary. James had spoken to her many times, but she sounded different today. Excited, maybe. "Yes, Mom," James answered, standing up straight even though she couldn't see him. "Her Majesty would like to see you in her private office at 9 o'clock. Please come prepared to discuss your recent invitation." James felt his stomach drop. The palace already knew about the Met Gala invitation. How was that possible? He had only received it yesterday afternoon. "Yes, Mom, I'll be there. And Captain, bring the invitation with you." The phone went quiet. James stared at it for a moment. The Queen wanted to see him personally. In 12 years of service, he had only spoken directly to the Queen 3 times, and never in her private office. 2 hours later, James walked through the palace halls carrying the golden envelope. His uniform felt heavier than usual. Other palace workers looked at him strangely. Word travels fast in a place like Buckingham Palace. Mrs. Fitzgerald met him outside the Queen's office. She was a thin woman with gray hair who always wore dark blue dresses. Today, she was almost smiling. "She's waiting for you, Captain. Don't look so worried. This is good news." James knocked on the heavy wooden door and heard a familiar voice say, "Come in." The Queen's private office was smaller than James expected. Books filled tall shelves. Family photos sat on a large wooden desk. The Queen sat behind the desk wearing a simple blue dress and a string of pearls. "Sit down, Captain Wellington," she said, pointing to a chair across from her desk. James sat down carefully, holding the invitation in his lap. "I understand you received something interesting yesterday," the Queen said. Her voice was kind, not stern like James had expected. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm not sure why I was chosen. It might be a mistake." The Queen smiled. "It's not a mistake, Captain. Anna Wintour called me personally yesterday evening. She specifically asked for you." James felt dizzy. Anna Wintour had called the Queen about him. She explained that this year's Met Gala theme celebrates people who serve and protect traditions. She wanted a real guard, someone who truly understands duty and service. Your name came up in her research. My name? But how did she even know I existed? Remember last year when you helped that lost American tourist find her way back to her hotel? Someone filmed you giving her directions and being so polite. The video became quite popular on social media. Ms. Wintour saw it. James remembered the elderly woman from Texas who had been crying because she couldn't find her hotel. He had simply walked her there during his break. He never knew anyone had filmed it. "So you see," the Queen continued, "you're already famous in your own small way. Ms. Wintour wants to show the world what real service looks like. But Your Majesty, I don't know anything about fashion or celebrities. What if I embarrass the royal family?" The Queen leaned forward. "Captain, you've served our family with honor for 12 years. You know exactly how to behave with dignity. That's precisely why you're perfect for this." She stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the palace gardens. "I want you to go to New York. Represent us well. Show them that tradition and duty are still important in our world. You're giving me permission to attend. I'm not just giving you permission, Captain. I'm ordering you to go. The palace will cover all your expenses. The royal tailors will prepare your ceremonial uniform." James felt like the room was spinning. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I won't let you down." The Queen turned back to him with a warm smile. "I know you won't. Now, let's start planning your trip to New York." 3 weeks later, James stood in his small apartment looking at his suitcase. He had never packed for a trip like this before. What do you bring to New York when you're going to the most famous fashion event in the world? The palace had given him a special travel case for his ceremonial uniform. It was huge and black, with locks and padding inside to keep everything safe. The royal tailors had worked day and night to make sure every part of his uniform was perfect. His red coat had been cleaned and pressed until it looked brand new. Every gold button had been polished until it shined like a tiny sun. His black pants had a perfect crease down the front. His tall black boots were so shiny he could see his face in them. The most important part was his bearskin hat. It was over 200 years old and had been worn by guards before him. The palace hat expert had cleaned and shaped it carefully. It sat in its own special box, looking like a sleeping black bear. James's regular clothes felt strange next to all this fancy uniform equipment. He packed 2 simple shirts, 1 pair of jeans, and his favorite sweater. He also brought a book about London history, in case anyone asked him questions about his city. The flight to New York was the most unusual experience of James's life. The palace had booked him a business-class seat, something he had never had before. The seat was bigger than his couch at home. The flight attendants kept bringing him food and drinks. But the strangest part happened an hour after takeoff. A woman across the aisle kept looking at him. Finally, she walked over. "Excuse me," she said with an American accent. "Are you the royal guard going to the Met Gala?" James nearly choked on his coffee. "How did you know that?" "You're famous. Your story is all over social media. Can I take a selfie with you?" Before James could answer, other passengers started looking over. Within minutes, a small crowd had formed around his seat. Everyone wanted to know about his uniform, his job at the palace, and why he was going to the Met Gala. James answered their questions politely, the way he had been trained to handle tourists at the palace. But inside, he felt very confused. He was not a celebrity. He was just a regular man with an unusual job. A teenager showed him her phone. "Look, you have your own hashtag already. #RoyalGuardToMet Gala has over 1 million posts." James stared at the screen. There were photos of him from the palace, pictures of his uniform, and even drawings that fans had made. Some people had written long posts about how excited they were to see real tradition at the Met Gala. "This is crazy," he said quietly. "Are you nervous?" asked an older man sitting nearby. James thought about this question. "Yes, very nervous. I don't know what to expect." "Just be yourself," said the woman who had first recognized him. "That's why people love your story. You're real." When the plane landed at JFK Airport in New York, James was shocked again. Through the airplane window, he could see photographers waiting at the gate. Someone had told them which flight he was on. As he walked through the airport carrying his special uniform case, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions at him. "Captain Wellington, how do you feel about going to the Met Gala? Are you excited to meet celebrities? What will you do at the party?" James walked steadily through the crowd, keeping his back straight and his face calm, just like he did at the palace. But his heart was beating very fast. A driver in a black suit held up a sign with his name on it. As they drove into Manhattan, James looked out the window at the tall buildings and busy streets. New York was louder and bigger than London. Everything moved faster here. "First time in New York?" the driver asked. "Yes," James replied, watching yellow taxis speed past them. "You picked a good week to visit. The whole city is talking about you." James shook his head in amazement. This was only the beginning. The day of the Met Gala finally came. James woke up at dawn in his hotel room on the Upper East Side. He had not slept much. Outside his window, New York was already buzzing with activity. He spent 2 hours getting ready. First, he showered and shaved very carefully. Then came the difficult task of putting on his full ceremonial uniform. Each piece had to be perfect. He started with his white cotton shirt, buttoned all the way to the top. Then came the red wool tunic with its thick gold braiding. The tunic was heavy and hot, but it made him feel important. He attached his medals to the left side of his chest. Each medal told a story of his years of service. The black pants were next, with the bright red stripe running down each leg. His tall black boots came up to his knees. They were so tight that walking felt strange at first. The white leather belt went around his waist, with his ceremonial sword hanging from the left side. The sword was real but not sharp. It was more than 100 years old and had been carried by guards before him. Finally, the most important part, his bearskin hat. James lifted it carefully from its special box. It was tall, black, and incredibly heavy. When he put it on his head, he instantly felt like a real royal guard. James looked at himself in the hotel mirror. He looked exactly like the guards in tourist postcards. But this time, he was the one going somewhere special. A black car picked him up at 6 p.m. The driver was very quiet during the ride to the Metropolitan Museum. Through the tinted windows, James could see crowds of people gathering on the streets. Police had blocked off several roads. As they got closer to the museum, the crowds got bigger. People held signs and took pictures of every car that passed. Some people were camping on the sidewalk, hoping to see celebrities arrive. The cars stopped at the bottom of the famous Met Gala steps. James could see the red carpet stretching up to the museum entrance. Photographers lined both sides of the steps. There had to be hundreds of them. "This is it, sir," the driver said. "Good luck." James took a deep breath and opened the car door. The sound hit him first. Camera shutters clicked like machine guns. Photographers shouted his name. "Captain Wellington. Look this way. Over here." James stepped onto the red carpet. His heavy boots made solid sounds on the ground. He kept his back straight and his face serious, just like when he stood guard at the palace. But this was completely different from the palace. The lights were so bright he could barely see. The noise was incredible. Every step he took created a new wave of camera flashes. Halfway up the stairs, he passed a group of reporters with microphones. "Captain, how does it feel to be here?" one shouted. James stopped for a moment. "It's an honor to represent the British Royal Guard," he said in his calm, professional voice. The photographers went crazy. They loved that he spoke with such dignity while wearing his magnificent uniform. Among all the fancy dresses and wild outfits, he looked like something from a different time. Other guests had been walking up the red carpet all evening, but when James appeared, everything changed. People stopped taking pictures of other celebrities to focus on him. Even the celebrities themselves turned to look. A famous actress in a golden dress stopped her own photo session. "Is that a real palace guard?" she asked her assistant. James continued walking up the steps. Each step felt like it took forever. The crowd behind the barriers was cheering for him. Some people were crying with excitement. At the top of the stairs, Anna Wintour herself was waiting for him. She wore a long silver dress and her famous sunglasses, even though it was evening. "Captain Wellington," she said with a smile. "You look absolutely perfect. Welcome to the Met Gala." James nodded politely. "Thank you for inviting me, Ms. Wintour. This is truly amazing." As they walked toward the museum entrance, James realized that his life had completely changed. He was no longer just a guard from London. Tonight, he was part of history. Anna Wintour led James through the main entrance of the Metropolitan Museum. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The ceiling was incredibly high, with beautiful paintings and gold decorations everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, casting sparkles across the marble floors. James had visited museums before, but never like this. Tonight, the museum was full of the most famous people in the world. Everyone was dressed in the most expensive and creative outfits he had ever seen. Some women wore dresses that looked like they were made of metal. Others had feathers attached to their arms like wings. One man was dressed like a knight in silver armor. Another woman wore a dress covered in tiny lights that blinked like stars. In the middle of all this fashion craziness, James looked exactly like what he was, a real soldier in a real uniform with real history. "Everyone is very excited to meet you," Anna Wintour said as they walked deeper into the gala. "You're the most talked about guest tonight." Before James could respond, a tall woman with blonde hair approached them. James recognized her immediately. It was Blake Lively, the famous actress. She was wearing a blue dress that seemed to change colors when she moved. "You must be Captain Wellington," she said with a warm smile. "I've been dying to meet you. Your uniform is absolutely beautiful." "Thank you, ma'am," James replied politely. "It's very old. Many guards have worn it before me." "Really? How old?" Blake asked, genuinely curious. "This particular tunic is from 1895. The style has not changed in over 200 years." A small crowd began to form around them. Other celebrities heard their conversation and came closer. James found himself surrounded by faces he had only seen on TV and in movies. Zendaya joined the group, wearing a dress that looked like it was made of peacock feathers. "Can you tell us what all those medals mean?" she asked, pointing to his chest. James felt more comfortable now. These were questions he could answer. "This one is for 10 years of service," he said, pointing to a silver medal. "This one is for protecting the royal family during official state visits. And this one," he touched a bronze medal with a red ribbon. "This one is for helping during the London Bridge incident 3 years ago." "You were there?" asked a man James recognized as Timothy Chalamet. "That was a real emergency. You helped save people." "I was off duty that day," James explained. "But I was nearby when it happened. My training taught me to help when people are in danger, even when I'm not working." The crowd around him grew bigger. More celebrities joined, all asking questions about his life, his job, and his uniform. James was surprised by how genuinely interested they were. He had expected them to be superficial, only caring about fame and fashion. Lady Gaga appeared next to him, wearing a dress made entirely of mirrors. "I have to ask," she said, "is it true you stand perfectly still for hours every day?" "Yes, sometimes for 6 hours without moving," James answered. "How do you do that? Don't you get bored or tired?" James thought about this. "You learn to find peace in stillness. It's like meditation. I think about protecting the people I serve. That gives me purpose." The celebrities looked at each other with surprise. In their world of constant movement, noise, and attention, the idea of finding peace in stillness was fascinating. "That's incredible," said Zendaya. "In our jobs, we're always moving, always performing. I can't imagine standing still for even an hour." "Different kinds of service," James said simply. A photographer approached the group. "Can we get a picture of everyone together?" As they posed for photos, James realized something wonderful was happening. These famous people weren't just being polite to him. They were genuinely curious about his life and his values. They respected what he represented: duty, tradition, and service to others. The conversation continued for another hour, with more celebrities joining and sharing their own thoughts about purpose and responsibility. The evening was going perfectly. James had been talking with celebrities for 2 hours, sharing stories about palace life and royal traditions. Everyone seemed genuinely interested in his work. He was starting to feel comfortable in this strange, glamorous world. The main event was about to begin. All the guests were moving toward the grand staircase where dinner would be served. James walked with his new celebrity friends, feeling amazed by how the night had turned out. That's when everything went wrong. Near the bottom of the famous marble staircase, a young waiter was carrying a tray of red wine glasses. The tray was heavy, and he was trying to move quickly through the crowd of expensively dressed guests. James noticed him first. The waiter looked nervous and was walking too fast. His hands were shaking slightly. James had spent years watching people, and something didn't look right. Suddenly, someone in a large feathered dress stepped backward without looking. She bumped into the waiter hard. The tray flew out of his hands. 12 glasses of deep red wine went flying through the air like liquid fireworks. James watched in slow motion as the wine splashed everywhere. Most of it hit the wall behind the staircase, but some of it splashed directly onto a famous painting that was worth millions of dollars. The painting was over 300 years old and priceless. The waiter fell to the ground. Broken glass scattered across the marble floor. Red wine dripped down the wall and began to form a puddle. For a moment, everyone just stared. The guests in their beautiful clothes stood frozen. The waiter looked like he wanted to disappear. Museum security guards started running toward them. James didn't think. His training took over. He stepped forward quickly, but calmly. "Everyone please step back," he said in a clear, strong voice. "Watch out for the broken glass." The guests obeyed him instantly. Something about his uniform and the way he spoke made people listen. James knelt down next to the young waiter, who was almost crying. "Are you hurt?" he asked kindly. No, I'm okay," the waiter whispered. "But the painting." "Oh no, the painting." "Don't worry about that right now," James said. "Let's get you up safely." He helped the waiter stand up and guided him away from the broken glass. Then James turned his attention to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "the museum staff will handle the cleanup. Please use the other staircase to go to dinner. There's nothing to worry about." His calm voice and confident manner worked like magic. Instead of panicking or crowding around to take pictures, the guests quietly moved away. They trusted him completely. Museum security arrived with cleaning supplies and art experts. The head of security looked grateful to see that James had already managed the situation. "Thank you, Captain," the security chief said. "You probably prevented a lot more damage." While the experts worked on the painting, James stayed with the young waiter. The boy was from Mexico and spoke very little English. He was terrified that he would lose his job. "It was an accident," James told him. "These things happen at big events. Don't blame yourself." Within 20 minutes, the area was clean. The painting expert said the wine hadn't soaked into the old paint, so the damage could be fixed. The waiter was relieved to learn he wouldn't be fired. But something amazing was happening around them. Every celebrity at the gala had seen how James handled the crisis. They watched him take charge when everyone else was frozen. They saw him help someone who needed it without caring about his own image. Camera phones had captured everything. Videos of the incident were already being posted online. But the videos didn't show a disaster. They showed a palace guard doing what he had been trained to do: protect people and keep everyone safe. As James rejoined his celebrity friends for dinner, he had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. By the time James sat down for dinner, something incredible was happening all over the world. Videos of him handling the wine crisis were spreading across the internet like wildfire. The first video was posted by a guest who had filmed everything on her phone. It showed James stepping forward when everyone else stood frozen. The video captured him helping the waiter and calmly directing the crowd to safety. Within 30 minutes, the video had been shared 1,000 times. Within an hour, it had 1 million views. But James didn't know any of this yet. He was sitting at a table with Blake Lively, Zendaya, and several other celebrities, enjoying the fancy dinner and continuing their conversations about duty and service. "What you did back there was amazing," Blake said, cutting her food. "Most people would have just stood there taking pictures." "It's just training," James replied modestly. "When there's a problem, you fix it." At tables around them, other guests kept looking over and pointing. James assumed they were still curious about his uniform. He had no idea they were talking about the videos going viral online. Meanwhile, across the world, social media was exploding. The hashtag Royal Guard Hero started trending in over 40 countries. People were sharing the video with captions like, "This is what real leadership looks like," and "Faith in humanity restored." News websites began picking up the story. The headlines were incredible. British Royal Guard saves the day at Met Gala. Palace Guard shows true class in crisis moment. When real heroes meet celebrities. Television news channels started showing the videos during their late-night broadcasts. CNN, BBC, and news stations around the world featured James's story. Back at the gala, Anna Wintour approached their table. She looked excited and was carrying her phone. "Captain Wellington," she said, "you need to see this." She showed him her phone screen. The video of him helping during the crisis had 15 million views. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. "Oh my," James said quietly, staring at the numbers. "Look at some of these comments," Anna continued, scrolling through her phone. "This man represents everything good about service and honor. We need more people like Captain Wellington in the world." True nobility isn't about titles, it's about character. Celebrity after celebrity came to their table to talk about the videos. Each one had seen different versions posted by different people. Lady Gaga showed him a video from a different angle. "Look," she said, "you can see how scared that waiter was, and how you made him feel safe. That's beautiful." Timothy Chalamet had screenshots of tweets about James. "People are saying you're their new hero." One person wrote, "In a world full of fake influencers, finally someone real." James felt overwhelmed. "I just did what anyone should do," he said. "But that's exactly the point," Zendaya explained. "Most people wouldn't have done anything. They would have been too worried about their expensive clothes or getting the perfect selfie for Instagram." The dinner continued, but now every conversation included talk about the viral videos. Celebrities kept showing James new posts, tweets, and comments about him. A famous director approached their table. "Captain, I'm serious about this. Would you consider acting? Hollywood could use someone with your presence and character." A well-known author said, "I want to write a book about your life. Your story represents something important that our world has lost." Several charity organizations sent messages through Anna Wintour, asking if James would consider becoming their spokesperson. But the most surprising message came from the White House. A staff member had called Anna Wintour to say that the president had seen the videos and wanted to meet James when he returned to London. As the evening wound down, James looked around at all the famous faces smiling at him. 12 hours ago, he had been an unknown palace guard from London. Now he was trending worldwide and had offers from Hollywood directors, book publishers, and world leaders. "This is unbelievable," he said to himself, shaking his head. Anna Wintour overheard him. "Captain, this is just the beginning. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the world will know your name." The Met Gala was ending, but James's night was far from over. As guests began to leave, many approached him with business cards, invitations, and personal contact information. Blake Lively was one of the first. She handed him a small card with her personal phone number. "I'm serious about visiting London," she said. "I want to learn more about British traditions. Maybe you could show me around the palace." "I would be honored," James replied, carefully putting the card in his uniform pocket. Ryan Reynolds, Blake's husband, joined them. "We're planning a charity event for veterans next month. Would you consider being our guest speaker? Your story about service could inspire a lot of people." Before James could answer, Zendaya approached with her assistant. "Captain, I'm working on a documentary about people who dedicate their lives to helping others. Would you let us film you at work sometime?" The offers kept coming. A famous fashion designer wanted to create a modern version of his uniform for a fashion show. A luxury watch company wanted him to be in their advertisements. 3 different movie studios wanted to make films about his life. But the most meaningful conversations happened away from the cameras and business deals. An older actor named Morgan Freeman sat with James on a quiet bench in the museum garden. "You know," Morgan said in his famous voice, "I've met presidents, kings, and celebrities from all over the world, but watching you tonight reminded me of something important." "What's that, sir?" James asked. "Real strength isn't about fame or money. It's about doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Tonight, everyone was watching, but you acted the same way you probably act every day at the palace." James thought about this. "I never really saw it that way. I just do my job." "Exactly," Morgan smiled. "That's what makes you special." Later, James had a long conversation with Emma Stone about the pressure of fame. She told him how difficult it could be to stay true to yourself when everyone wants something from you. "The hardest part," she explained, "is remembering who you were before you became famous. Don't lose that, James. The world needs people like you. Leonardo DiCaprio approached him near midnight with an interesting proposal. I run a foundation that protects the environment, he said. We need someone who understands duty and responsibility to help us spread our message. Would you consider joining our board? James was surprised. But I don't know anything about environmental science. You don't need to, Leonardo explained. We have scientists for that. We need someone who people trust and respect. Someone who represents integrity. The most unexpected conversation came from a young singer named Billie Eilish. She seemed shy as she approached him. Can I ask you something personal? She said quietly. Of course. How do you find purpose in your work? Sometimes I feel like everything I do is just for entertainment. You actually protect people. James looked at this young woman whom millions of people loved and admired. You protect people too, he said. Your music helps people feel less alone. That's a type of protection. Billie's eyes lit up. I never thought of it that way. Different people serve in different ways, James continued. Your songs probably save more people than my sword ever could. As the night ended, James realized something important had happened. These celebrities weren't just being polite or trying to use his sudden fame. They were genuinely interested in the values he represented: duty, service, and putting others first. Many of them confessed that despite their success, they often felt empty inside. They had money, fame, and everything they wanted, but they struggled to find real meaning in their lives. James's simple dedication to service had touched something deep in them. They saw in him what they often felt was missing from their own lives: a clear sense of purpose. Anna Wintour found him as he was preparing to leave. James, she said, you've given everyone here a gift tonight. You've reminded us what really matters. As James rode back to his hotel, his phone buzzed constantly with new messages, friend requests, and interview offers. His life would never be the same. 3 days later, James sat on the airplane flying back to London. The first-class seat felt strange after everything that had happened. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with messages from around the world, but he had finally turned it off to get some peace. The flight attendant recognized him. You're the royal guard from the Met Gala, she said with a smile. My daughter thinks you're a hero. James smiled back politely, but inside he felt confused. Hero. He still didn't understand why people saw him that way. He had simply done what felt right. When the plane landed at Heathrow Airport, James was shocked again. Hundreds of reporters and photographers were waiting for him. British news crews, international journalists, and even some of the celebrities he had met in New York had flown to London to see him arrive. Palace security helped him through the crowd, but James stopped to answer a few questions. How does it feel to be famous worldwide? One reporter asked. I'm the same person I was a week ago, James replied honestly. I'm just a palace guard who loves his job. What will you do with all the offers you've received? James had thought about this during the flight. I'll consider the ones that help people. The rest don't interest me. The next morning, James had another meeting with the Queen. This time, the meeting was different. When he entered her office, she was smiling widely. Captain Wellington, she said, or should I say, Captain Wellington, international sensation. Your Majesty, I hope my behavior reflected well on the royal family. You did more than that, the Queen replied. She picked up several newspapers from her desk. Every front page had James's picture on it. You reminded the world what service really means. The Queen stood up and walked to the window. James, I have a proposal for you. The palace has received hundreds of requests from organizations, schools, and governments around the world. They all want you to speak about duty, service, and character. James felt nervous. I'm not a speaker, Your Majesty. I'm a guard. You are, she agreed. But you're also something more now. You're a symbol of the values we hold dear. She turned back to him. I want to create a new position for you. Royal Cultural Ambassador. James's eyes widened. What would that mean? You would travel representing the royal family and British traditions. You would speak to young people about service, visit schools and military academies, and work with charitable organizations. You would still be a guard, but you would also help bridge different cultures. James thought about all the celebrities who had told him they wanted to find more purpose in their lives. Maybe he could help them and many others. If you think it would help people, Your Majesty, I accept. Over the following months, James's life changed completely, but in ways he had chosen. He turned down most movie offers and advertising deals, but he accepted invitations to speak at universities, military academies, and youth organizations. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds kept their promise and visited London. James gave them a private tour of the palace, and they became genuine friends. They started a scholarship program together for young people who wanted to pursue careers in public service. Leonardo DiCaprio invited James to join his Environmental Foundation's board. James learned that protecting the planet was another form of guard duty, protecting future generations. Most importantly, James continued working at the palace. But now, twice a month, he traveled the world sharing his message that everyone can serve others, no matter what their job is. The shy, quiet guard had become a voice for service and character worldwide. But he never forgot that his most important job was still standing guard, protecting the people who needed him most. James had gone to the Met Gala as an unknown soldier. He came home as a bridge between worlds, showing everyone that true nobility comes from serving others with honor, dignity, and genuine care.